Welcome back to another episode of Career Journeys Revealed. Today's guest is someone whose career truly spans the spectrum of impact and innovation, Balki Kodarapu. With over 20 years in the tech industry, Balki has worn many hats, driving transformation across fintech companies, analytics at New Relic, elevating customer success at SupportLogic, and advancing healthcare innovation at Lulu Health. He's also taken on fractional engineering leadership roles, helping multiple companies scale, as well as succeed during critical growth. Balki brings a unique blend of technical depth, business acumen, and heart-centered leadership. And we are thrilled to dive into his story. Welcome to the show, Balki.
Hi, Hitesh. Thank you. And hi, Han. Great to see you here, and appreciate you welcoming me to the podcast, to your early episode. So excited.
So, Balki, based on just looking at your profile and the brief conversations we had, it seems like you had a rich career in regards to being both in, doing development as well as being an engineering leader. Maybe if you go ahead and rewind back in regards to your individual contributor role, especially being an engineer, as you reflect on that career, like if you think about what went well and what are some of the things that, if you can change at this point, what would those be?
Yeah, my first 10 years, although typical for an engineer, had some very interesting twists to them. So first of all, I studied mechanical engineering, but the first day I entered college, I promised myself I will not work in the mechanical field. So I was always obsessed with software and computers. So yeah, I followed through with that. So I did get a job at a prestigious mechanical engineering organization back in India when I graduated. But 3 days later, I actually cried, literally cried, and said, I'm not doing this. So my parents supported me and said, do what you want to do. And then I did some coursework in computer science. Taught actually back in India, it wasn't such an easy means to get into a software job. So I taught in schools, in computer institutes to refresh my skills and extend my skills. And then eventually came to the US. It's a long story between how I did the teaching to my actual professional software career.
How did you convince people to give you a shot?
Yeah, this is a vulnerable story, but it was back in India, so it was fake it until you make it type of thing. So I was teaching, and at the same place where I learned to, it was like a residency program that I went through, and did a very advanced project that got commercial value. So that was my actual real experience other than teaching. And when I had an opportunity to apply for my work visa, so I was able to use that experience and apply for a work visa with a larger company that brought me here. And then I started, my first real job was actually in the US based on that project I did during my coursework.
Nice. Balki, which particular company was that, the first company that you joined within the US?
The consulting company back in India was called Birla Horizons. I don't know if they even exist today. But the first job I joined was in a little town called Apopka. It's about 100 miles northwest of Orlando. I think not quite 100, maybe 50 miles. It's this very rural town, and there was a company that did RV dealership software, and that was the company they were able to place me at. So the founder, this is my attachment with founders actually, the founder wrote all the code for 10 years in Visual Basic and Access for the database. I remember I used to go down to the post office and ship our CDs on a regular basis on his behalf. So that's probably like, now that I'm talking to you, my attachment with founders and that, sheer willpower, brute force to make things happen. So that I spent a year and a half maybe with that company.
So from there, what was the next company that you joined, and what were some of the challenges that you found going to the next company?
Yeah, so next, the Silicon Valley bug bit me while I was there. So it was a stark difference in being in a pop golf like 2,000 people to Silicon Valley, but there were a lot of opportunities. This was early 2000, so Silicon Valley was booming, and another consulting company picked me up, and I joined a system on chip company called NeoMagic, but in their IT division. So a very small IT organization. We were pretty much building internal applications. So, but that was my first exposure to web applications. So until then, I was doing just desktop application. Like I mentioned, we used to ship CDs with Visual Basic and Access Code on them, database. But this was my first exposure to web applications, although internal facing IT applications.
So you come from the East Coast. You arrive in the Silicon Valley, effectively at the peak of the dot-com boom. So some of our listeners may not know, but in late 1999, we had, perhaps the single biggest one-day stock crash that tended to shake up the dot-com boom. And then it started to essentially collapse throughout 2000, 2001. And the area would effectively shed at that point over the next 7 to 8 years, something like 45% of all the jobs in the Silicon Valley. So you come all the way over here.
Yes.
First of all, you took a big risk. You come to India. In your words, you faked it till you made it. Then you come to the Valley, right at the very top. What happens next?
Yes. Yeah. You correctly know the timeline. So within months, if not weeks, I saw the industry collapsing overnight, right? So people losing jobs, a lot of the people in my consulting company, and then eventually it came to me as well. So NeoMagic scaled down quite a bit, and they laid off all the external consultants, which I was an external consultant. The consulting company tried for a couple weeks, but it was slim pickings at that point. So the consulting company also said, sorry, we can't help you anymore. Along with all these challenges, I was on a visa. So, you probably know it's precarious to be on a visa and not without a job. So you usually have anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks to find the next assignment, or you're out of status. So I had very narrow timeline to figure something out. And then
by out of status, you mean you have 6 weeks to look for a job, get an interview, get the offer.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you have to start too, right?
Yeah. You have to get at least the H1 transferred.
You have to start. You have to get the transfer done. And then by out of status, you mean you get kicked out of America, right?
Or you're illegal. You can stay, but you're tagged illegal at that point.
So there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. And to add to that pressure, we were just married. So my wife was in Dallas. She finished her master's, and she had a great job with Nortel. And I kind of convinced her Silicon Valley is the place to be. And she reluctantly quit that job, followed me to the Valley. So we were married. We were like building our home. Like we bought a lot of things, assuming everything would go well, a lot of debt. And then, so that's where I ended up. So I would say that was like the peak of my panic mode in the States. Like I assumed everything would go right. But long story short, I got an offer through another consulting company.
Before you go there, tell us about your state of mind, Because, a lot of our listeners, some of them are out of work right now. Like, how did you manage yourself at that time?
A few memories, but it was, I would give a hat tip to my wife, Mansa. She's one of the bravest women I know. So she's like, don't worry about it. Like we came to like, we were not in deep debt, but all my savings up until then, and my wife had debt, actually school debt. So we're probably in like 60 to 80K in debt. And I was panicking, losing sleep. What does this mean for us? There was also some blissful ignorance, even though like all of this was happening in the background of the industry collapsing. I wasn't like, I was in my honeymoon mode with my wife, right? We were having so much fun. Like I was in this blissful ignorance sort of mode. So that helped me, honestly. Like, plus, yeah, like I mentioned, Mansa was a huge support. She's the bravest woman I know. She's like, don't worry about it. We'll go back to India and set up a new life. So that was helpful. Yeah, so that was my state of mind. I started applying to jobs. Luckily, there was this tiny consulting company based out of LA, and they had these captive fintech clients, and one of them was a online banking software company called Carillion that was based out of Portland. So I went through their interview process. They liked my personality and technical skills. So they hired me and placed me in Portland. At that point, I didn't know what Portland was or where it was on the map. I've never heard of Portland back then. Well, that was the only first option I had. We thought for a day or two, like, how can I go to a place from the valley and start my career afresh? And we honestly didn't have a choice at that point. I had to take that job or go back to India, or risk looking for another role for a few more days, but it would be in days. So I took the job in Portland and been here almost 20 years now.
So in the middle of all this, you moved into management at some point, right?
So in my early career, I somehow started in a technical support organization. So, that was not my path. But again, because of the situation, that was the only role I had. I started in a tech support organization. It was fairly technical. There was a lot of writing code, but it wasn't like massive scale projects in a typical SaaS organization. So I feel that built an extremely good foundation for me in terms of customer empathy, leadership, and communication skills, because I was in these high stakes situations constantly. I had to build a lot of empathy for customers and their challenges. So I believe that went well. The second part, though, is I switched relatively early on in my career before building a lot of technical depth, like large scale architectures or a lot of front end experience. So I became a leader because there was a gap, and my leaders felt like I could do a good job. So that's a gap that haunts me a little bit even today. I've learned those skills through experiences, but if I were to go back, I would spend a little more time hands-on in scaling architectures. But long story short there, in terms of leadership, it was in a larger...
Balki, let me push you on that a little bit. Yeah. But how would you know if you know enough? I mean, the corpus of computer science and what you know and don't know is so vast that, like, how would you know? How would you know that you're technical enough?
In my case, it was a bit more specific because I'm in a tech support organization. Most of my projects were measured in terms of weeks at most, right? So it's maybe a few hundred hours. But in my mind, it would be multi-quarter project or a more full-fledged project where I could see that end-to-end life cycle of SDLC from requirements to building and POC and scaling and production. That company had those projects. I vicariously learned from them, but I was not in the weeds of such projects before I went into leadership.
Do you think it hurt you that you didn't know it? Because it sounded like everything is fine, so it's like no harm, no foul, right?
Yeah, I mean, during our pre-interview, we talked about one relatively large telemetry company, and I struggled there partially because of that. So I landed in a role and a team that was highly technical. So we were building a agent that had like micro scaling strategy that even like 0.5% performance would mean a big deal. And I struggled in such a setting where a huge impact project and a product. So yeah, that was when I reflected, like, just being a superstar people skills and process oriented leader had its shortcomings for an engineering leader if they didn't have, or when I didn't have the deep technical chops.
Great, thanks, Balki. So based on what I'm hearing from you is the fact that for an advice you would give to engineers that are IC engineers is to be able to go ahead and focus on various different diverse kind of projects and getting much more depth in regards to their experience before moving on to management. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. So I think it's still true. It's even more true today, right? So we can go on for hours talking about how all engineering leaders should be hands-on. And I would recommend, if they're like tempted and getting antsy about moving to leadership, spend another 6 months, spend another 1 year to expand or broaden their skill set, either go deeper or broader. Today, it's easy to, if you're a front-end engineer, see the adjacent stacks, learn more about UX or backend, or if you're a backend engineer, learn more about full stack or infra. I would highly recommend going either a bit broader or deeper, or even better, I-shaped, right? So two main areas, and then a lot of breadth in other areas.
And maybe you can give us some insight on the downside of not following your advice. So like I'm the non-technical manager leading a very technical team. Let's just pretend. Like what happens in those situations? Because, the person who wants to play devil's advocate could say, Hana's the boss, right? So in my infinite wisdom, I'm just going to like coach you on how to be nicer to your colleagues.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. Really good question. So from that experience at that telemetry company, that really reflected on that failure, I would say. And you could still do both, right? So even today, I'm not the most technical planet on the person. I could run circles around many mid-level engineers in terms of executing and getting things done. But, I don't have super deep technical skills, but I get past that with a few things. So I have this simple playbook of what I would do to when I join an organization. So I won't go too deep, but some of the things are, I'll focus on setting up my local dev environment, insert myself into the on-call rotation if there's one, or create one and be the first to be the on-call rotation, be the triage person for all the bugs that come in. Usually there's no steward for such things in companies. Make sure I commit, create my first PR and make sure it goes to production within the first week or the next available release. And these are small but impactful things that I do. And what I do that for a specific reason or a series of reasons. One is to build the respect with engineers who are at the ground level, right? So even today, people respect, or engineers respect, somebody who has some level of engineering chops. So all of these things go towards that. And the second, more practical reason is being at that front lines and ground level helps me understand and build empathy for the challenges, right? So in almost every situation, the setting up a local dev environment is the most painful part of an onboarding experience. So going through that experience helped me find the gaps.
I think that's a really important call out for the audience that sometimes people don't realize. It's not in vogue to use military analogies for business, but I do think there's something to be said about how the military works, in that you have a large amounts of people, they need to be orchestrated to perform high stakes tasks. But what is different between the military and, say, a software organization is, let's say you have a sniper platoon. There's no expectation that the leader of the platoon is the best sniper. But software is oftentimes very different because of this respect issue. You could be respected as a general, even if you're not the best soldier. But it can be a challenge in certain environments in software when you do not appear to be, one of the best to do the work, even if you are an extraordinary leader. And I think that's a really interesting call out that you just pointed out.
Yeah. One more important thing as a fractional leader is also now I don't even have the authority, right? So for all practical purposes, I'm the colleague to most of the engineering team. So it's even more important for me to build empathy and respect through influence and my own skill set rather than just I'm the CTO, you listen to me. I don't think it ever works, but even in the case it works, it's like I don't have that luxury today.
Balki, this brings up to our next transition in regards to, especially within your career itself, where it seems like you've been part of various different companies taking on leadership roles, being a full-time employee, and now you're doing the fractional roles across multiple different companies. How was that transition like? And especially if you could maybe give us maybe one or two projects that were, maybe a pivotal point in regards to the decisions that you had to make and the learnings that that came as part of that as well.
Yeah. It's been a reflective journey for me. Maybe I'll spend some time on why I even chose this path, and then maybe we can unpack any interesting areas from there. So, to paint a picture, I was in a pretty deep tech ML company before I made this switch, and I was having the best time of my life, like building product, shipping it, working closely with top rated ML engineers. But when the market shifted and the layoff happened, I felt like I was naked when the tide went away, right? So I'm like, man, I lost connection with the community. I wasn't actively included in the community. So that was a pivotal moment for me. Like when I was looking for a job, I had to reestablish my connections and my thought leadership, and it was painful. So that was the dichotomy of enjoying the work versus staying connected to the community. At that point, I took a vow that I enjoy and get too much value from being part of the community. So I'm like, I will do this for the rest of my life. And I also realized doing that and claiming full allegiance to a startup, they're almost impossible. It could be possible, maybe, but it wasn't possible for me. Like to spend 60, 80 hours in a startup, but also building my thought leadership. So I wanted to do something different in terms of being able to do both things, and I felt these fractional leadership roles would help. That's one thing. The other thing is also during that journey, I lost my mom, and that was another reflective moment about what's this life about, this typical midlife crisis. And at least for the short term, I didn't want to go into another startup and be fully dedicated to one company and make career my number one priority. I wanted to balance a little bit.
It sounded like you really wanted to you had this insight. You felt like you have things to offer, and you realize that for you to be able to, offer what you felt you were good at, which is, leadership principles, um, the way to do that is to create a conversation with the community that was ongoing and effectively, evergreen. And one way to do that was through fractional work. One of the benefits of being a fractional CTO is that you are exposed to a lot more issues in a lot of different environments simultaneously. And so that gives you a broader perspective on leadership. I am curious, for those who might be interested in becoming a fractional CTO, like what would be some advice on how do you get involved? How do you even get your first deal? How do you convince somebody that, hey, you should make me a fractional CTO when I have full-time engineers, and why should I hire, Balki versus Han as an example?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Maybe I'll spend a couple minutes on how I felt prepared to do this, right? This is obviously hindsight 2020 looking back. So I both intentionally and unintentionally was part of companies at different stages. So it was not linear, like not from 0 to 500K, 500K to 5 million. It was all over the place. But if I collect all of my experiences together, I have pretty good experience from 0 to that 40 million ARR tech companies. I have a small gap between 40 and maybe 80 million, but then again from 80 million to IPO and beyond, right? So I have this mishmash of experiences that I can pull from. The second thing is that, as I mentioned, I love writing. So for the last 15 years, I've been journaling, like not quite journaling, but like I'm very reflective and write a lot about how I feel and what happened to me. So I think during pre-interview, I mentioned I have 2,500 pages worth of notes that I can tap into and pull experiences from. The other thing is I built my own startups, 2 startups, one failed, one moderately successful. And then I've always had one or more side hustles. So that gives me like a first class view into what it takes to be a startup and a founder. Again, I mentioned I like writing and I like staying connected with the community. So that helps me, like that's part of my lead gen. I didn't do it for lead gen. I do it because I enjoy writing and helping others. The other 2 elements are also, for the last 12 years, I had access to world-class coaches, mentors. It started at that Paytrace payments company, where they gave me access to a very, very expensive and world-renowned coach. And I've never looked back. So I either pay for my own coaches, or now these days I'm into peer-led groups. But yeah, so I've been addicted to those peer groups. So yeah, if you can like put all these things together, that helps me be a great fractional leader, I think. So this is all looking back. I don't know if there's a shortcut to do all of these things, but I would say, at the very least, don't look up and say, I need a job when you need it, versus build that pipeline, stay in the community, give more than you ask for. One philosophy I have is Gary Vaynerchuk. So he has this hook, right punch or something like that, where it's like 95% of the time you're in this giving mode, but when you need something, you ask for it and things will just happen to you. That's because the default mode is giving. So I've been a big proponent and follower of that philosophy. Just give back without expecting anything.
This is a great detailed response to that. Balki, I know you write a lot about the fractional role as well as the role of engineering going forward, especially developers. Like if you fast forward 5 years from now, like where are your thoughts in regards to, especially for engineers, because a lot of our audience are, with engineering background, like where do you see the engineering role from your perspective?
Yeah, I don't know about 5 years. It feels like so far into the future, right?
Maybe
But
a couple of years, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it's evolving fast. So we touched on this topic a couple times. For us as engineers to adapt, we have to adapt quickly, in my opinion. So two ways you can still be a craftsperson and evolve with this world is one, think of more full stack, right? So I'm a front end engineer or I'm a back end cryptocurrency engineer and I want to be world class at it. It might work, but my bet is you would be 1 in 1 million people to be able to do that. So I highly recommend go full stack. If you're front end, see what is adjacent, UX, or even one layer deeper, be the product person, put on the product lens, or back end and infra specialist. That's one way to see. And the other way is also be the founder of your team or organization, right? So think of from the outcome and impact perspective. These things were always true, but 2 years ago, you could get by saying, I'm a great engineer, and then I could be successful, I'm rare, and I can demand high compensation just by being good at my craft. It's not true today. It'll be less true tomorrow, 2 years from now. That's the evolution I see for engineers. A lot more leadership, looking outside in, and I'll pitch myself in terms of being a thought leader as well. Again, you may be doing more gigs versus join a company and assume that you'll get an exit or high compensation. There will be a world where you may have to do two or three different work for 2 or 3 different companies and provide your expertise there.
That is great insight. I mean, if I were to play it back, what you're saying is that you're really telling engineers to become polymaths, get broader, because the world is becoming more uncertain. And to mitigate risk, you need to have more skills. You need to know something about a lot more things, because the game isn't about keeping your job. The game is about staying in the game.
Yeah. And, to add to that, thinking like a founder. Again, as I mentioned, it was always important to be successful, but you could get by just your key craft skills, right? So with Gen AI, that's being democratized. So you have to think like a founder, or at least get very close to your product manager and think about the outcomes and impact and influence those.
Do you think there will be product managers versus engineering managers in the future world?
Very few, I think. Again, in my role, I help 8 teams across 3 companies now, and the ratio at the peak of engineering management craft was like, at the most, you should have 5 people reporting to you. And that slowly creeped up, not so slowly creeped up to 15 and 20 people, right? So, and in one company, I'm the only quote unquote engineering person on US soil where everybody else is offshore. So, yeah, to answer more directly, I don't know if it's a dying craft, but it'll become a lot less hierarchical and a lot more flat, I think.
Thanks, Balki, for that insight. For the different types of clients that you work on, let's just say if there are companies that are looking for the service that you provide, like what are your typical kind of clients that you work with, and how do you help them?
Yeah, so 3 personas that I help with are somebody who has some level of product market fit and has been using consultants or part-time people putting their product together. I think it's risky for them to continue on that path, even though they're getting traction. They have to start thinking about the scale and security aspect of things. So in that scenario, I'm the advisor where spend 10, 20 hours a month, not very much, to like think 1 to 2 stages ahead, right? Not just keep building, but think ahead by 6 months, 12 months, 5x, 10x. So that's one. Another scenario is a small venture-backed firm that it's become pretty typical that they'll hire an agency or a team that's probably offshore and be the liaison between the offshore team and the execs and the GTM teams onshore. So I've built a specialty of being that bridge. That engagement is typically 30 to 50 hours a month, and I've built processes, frameworks, and things like that to be successful in that setting. Third area is a bit more advanced. They have engineering leaders and principals, and they need some advice and guidance on slightly leaning more towards engineering roadmap, processes, that 10,000-foot level of what to expect next. And that also includes the Gen AI strategy, both for product, for scaling their product, as well as scaling their operations, right? It's become like two ways Gen AI is disrupting these companies, not just their how to incorporate into the product, but also to improve their operational efficiency. So those are some of the personas that I help with, and I built frameworks to help these companies.
Nice. What's the best way for our listener, anybody who wants to get a hold of you, especially in regards to reaching out to you for support or services?
Yeah, I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. I post there twice a week, like clockwork, Tuesdays and Thursdays, sharing what I learned and what my failures and successes. So please follow and feel free to connect with me. I also recently built my website. It's called Your CTO in US. So it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek website, so you can see the services and what I offer over there.
Wonderful, nice. Balki, as we wrap up, if you had to give maybe 2 or 3 different nuggets of advice to our audience, especially engineers that are transitioning in this particular disruptive kind of world of unknown as we go through and not knowing how things will be settling going forward, what are some of the things that you would go ahead and let them know?
Yeah, I mean, Reid Hoffman's book, I forgot the name, but that was a pivotal thing for me that happened about 10, 12 years ago, where the philosophy is combine your desire, your skills, but don't forget what the market wants. So TLDR there is be adaptable, right? So the world is changing, and what the world wants may not coincide with what you want to do, but you are the one that needs to be adaptable, right? So, we just talked about how front-end engineer was a desired commodity even 2 years ago, and now like you have to be a full stack engineer to be successful. So that's what the market wants. So the highlight there is always be in the market, understanding what the market wants and steadily move towards that. That's what I would tell engineers. That's what I tell my kids. They wanted to be software engineers, and the world is shifting right under their feet right now. So I'm like, think like an entrepreneur, think like a founder, see what else is out there.
Thanks for that, because I know a lot of emerging engineers, they'll definitely be helped by that kind of advice. So I really appreciate it. Thanks, Balki, for being part of our podcast, and I really enjoyed the insights that you provided us. And I always look forward to the LinkedIn posts that you do on a regular basis. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you so much, Han and Hitesh. I really enjoyed this.
I had such an amazing time. You're so humble, vulnerable, authentic. I think that's such a rare quality sometimes in engineering leadership, and to have this conversation with you, it's incredibly refreshing. I think you did a great job of explaining is just how important it is for an engineering leader to have respect. You may not necessarily want to optimize around being liked, but you have to have respect, because otherwise the team will not follow you. They don't give a damn about your job title. And I think that's really important. So if you want to go into management and you think your job title is going to give you all the power, you're going to be dead wrong when it comes to managing engineers. You need to have that respect. And I think you really punctuated that point in so many different ways. And I hope that, our listeners take away from that just how important that lesson is.
Amazing. Thank you so much for summarizing those.
Thank you once again, Balki.